All right, Mark, I'm really excited to dive into this. I can barely balance my 401k, so I know we want to go super deep into finances here. Uh,
I
but
don't
I,
think you're alone in that. I'm pretty sure.
yeah, like, how do I max out my 401k? But I do think there's so much. I'm not a finance guy. Like I read like the psychology of money and other books and things like that. But I think like what you wrote, in terms of your latest book, can also relate to a lot of people, life, career lessons, parenting lessons, things like that. And so, I'm looking forward to diving in. So thanks for really carving out the time to do this.
My pleasure.
Okay. I usually don't do this, but let's start with a quote because I think this encapsulates a lot of what we can cover today. And it's by Ben Franklin, somewhere in your book, in the middle. And the quote goes like this: Money has never made man happy, nor will it. There is nothing in its nature to produce happiness. The more of it one has, the more one wants. And I'd just love for you to just kind of reflect on that and the significance of it, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I think the natural tendency for people is to think if they had more money, that somehow it would lead to more fulfillment and happiness. And there's a part in the book where I talk about the destructive cycle of wealth. And what it means is let's say you're making 100,000 a year, and you're like, wow, when I make two, I'm not really that completely at peace of mind. I not don't have really that fulfillment, really that connection. I don't really feel that that sense of freedom, fulfillment, and love in my life. But maybe when I get to 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, and then you get there and it's still not there. And the reason is because, and this was really counterintuitive to me, because when I started up as a financial advisor at 22 years old, I really thought if I helped people grow their money, grow their portfolios, that would result in more peace of mind, and more happiness, and more security. But what I discovered was actually often the opposite, that the more money they had, the more stressed out, the more anxious they became about it. And, cautionary tales are abound. If you think about rich people like Elvis Presley or Prince or, Howard Hughes or Marilyn Monroe, people that had massive amounts of money, massive amounts of fame, and it actually worked against them. Not only did it not make them happy, it actually created a lot of anger and resentment, pain and suffering in their life. So, there's actually been studies that of people that lost their ability to walk, and people that inherited $100 million, or won it in the lottery, and 6 months after the event, they both report very similar amounts of fulfillment and happiness in their life. So it really is true that it can't make us happy.
It's a great perspective, and I think one of the things I try to do is just, I feel like everyone has a different view in life based on how they were raised, where they're from, that sort of lens. And I know you talk a lot about in the book, just sort of the preconceived notions we have, and you break that down. I'd love to hear in your words, because I think you're a great storyteller. What was it like growing up in West Virginia? Because I feel like you've got a great memory and it's very detailed, and I'd just love to hear from you what that childhood was like. What are some of your earliest memories?
Yeah, I can remember my mom and dad got us out of the hollers and hills of West Virginia when I was about 5 years old, and we moved over the hillbilly highway, they called it. We got to Cincinnati and we laid down stakes there. But every summer we'd go back and visit our relatives, and as we would go back and visit our relatives, I mean, we'd see the destitute poverty, and I asked my dad about his childhood growing up, and he literally lived in a shack by the railroad. And it was they had so much poverty that in the winter, the rats would try to get in the house to get warm, and they would cut the tops off of instant carnation milk cans to nail to the baseboard so the rats couldn't come in. And I started to wonder, how did my dad get us out of West Virginia? We weren't rich. We still only lived about a 1,500 square foot house, but we got out of that kind of destitute poverty. And I asked him, I said, how did you do it? How did you get us out of there? He said, well, I asked the right questions. And to me, at 10 years old, that sounded like something Yoda would say. And I said, well, what's that mean? He said, well, if I ask myself, why am I doomed to live in this destitute poverty that I was born into, my life would have come out one way. On the other hand, I asked myself, how could I create wealth and prosperity for other people that would then lead to prosperity for me and my family by creating value for others? And based on that one question, it sent my life in a completely different direction. And as I would go back and we would go visit West Virginia, I would see that it was the people there were almost under a spell. It was a screen by which they saw the world. And my grandfather, even though he got us out of the coal mines, he definitely had that screen that money was evil, that people that had money were greedy, that the only way to get money and get ahead in the world was to steal it and hurt other people. And he died holding on to those beliefs. Even though they gave him opportunities to go up, he worked for Union Carbide on the line making chemicals. Eventually that killed him. He died to hold on to those beliefs. And my dad took on entrepreneurial beliefs based on the ideals of the American dream. And based on the screen you look at life on can lead you to a completely different outcome in your life. So growing up, when I wrote the book, I went back and had to think about this stuff and talk to my family and talk to my relatives. That was an emotional part of writing the book.
I imagine. When you were about 15 or so, what were your parents doing career-wise?
My dad, even when he was in West Virginia, was going up the hollers selling life insurance. But by the time I was 15, he was a financial planner. He did tax planning for people. He did mutual funds. He did life insurance. He did, use, at those days, the computer was just really getting involved with doing actually math and doing financial plans, figuring out how much people needed to retire. So he was a financial planner, and I always idolized him. Other kids were idolizing football players and baseball players, and I wanted to be a financial planner, go figure, kind of a weird kid. But that's what he was doing by the time I was in high school.
And what did your mom do, mostly?
My mom actually worked in the company. She was a homemaker for a lot of the years, but as we got her older and we got into school, she went to work for the company and did all the accounting. So it was really a family operation from the beginning.
I think we're going to talk a lot about your dad more, but I just love to hear when you think about lessons from your either parent, is there one that comes to mind that you've instilled in your kids? I know you have a full basketball team at home. So is there a lesson that comes to mind?
Yeah, we have 8 kids. Melissa and I are retreads. I had 3 and she had 3, and we both agreed, hey, we're not going to have any more. And then 3 years into the marriage, she's like, hey, I love you so much, we should have kids. I'm like, okay, let's do it. So we have 8. What my dad drilled into me really early, my dad gave me the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill when I was 10 years old. And he said, read this book, read it every year of your life if you want to actually create wealth and prosperity for you and the people you love. I took his word to that. But inside of that, he taught me the values of the American dream. Number one, and the key is that no one owes you anything, except he didn't say anything. He said the S word. No one owes you anything. You're not entitled to anything. And you have to work hard and serve others and create value for them first before you're entitled to actually have financial wealth or prosperity. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're not going to be of any value to anybody. He also instilled the ideals of hard work. There was a recent survey done about the American dream. Here's what people normally want. They want a house. They like to have a home that they own. They like to retire. They like to have, most people want to have children. They want to have a family. And so that's kind of the basics of the American dream. And then the survey, it was in the Wall Street Journal, it asked people, did you think it was going to be easy to do that? And only 8% said it was going to be easy. And I thought, well, that's a big duh, because it's not supposed to be easy. The other thing that my dad told me is it's going to be a lot of hard work. And work is a value all of its own. I remember when it would snow in Cincinnati. I'm in Scottsdale now, it doesn't snow here. But all the other kids, when school was off, they'd go sleigh riding, and I would get a snow shovel, and I'd go shovel my neighborhood's walks. And my dad would tell me, you go do the neighbor's walks. If they pay you nothing, that's fine, you do it anyway. If they give you a cookie, that's great. If they give you money, that's great. But you will have the sense of satisfaction to know that you worked hard and you had a job well done. And that's a value of its own, regardless of how much you're getting paid. And those are kind of foundational principles of the American dream. And he taught me that capitalism, free markets, entrepreneurism and innovation is a screen through which you see the world. And if you see the world through that screen, you're willing to do things people that have an entitlement or victim screen of the world will never be able to accomplish. So I was really lucky the screens that my father built into me.
That's incredible. Do you ever, I always feel like there's good things we can learn from people and maybe things that we should change. How do you think back to your grandfather? Like, how do you think of him now, knowing what you know? Obviously, it's a little easier in hindsight.
Yeah, boy, that's a great question. By the time I ended, I felt a little bit of resentment at my grandfather when I started to write the beginning of the book. He came to visit us in Cincinnati only one time. It was August. It was hot and humid. He came to the house. He came inside. The only time he ever visited us. And my dad, we lived in a house, maybe 1,800 square feet house. I looked it up on Zillow. It's only worth about $250,000 a day. So it's not a mansion. And he came in, and the first thing he said, he looked at my dad, and he said, "How many people did you have to rip off to get this house?" And my dad wanted him to be proud of him. He had worked so hard to build a business and to take care of his family. And my dad said to him, I'll never forget, he said, "George, I worked really hard to help a lot of people and to fight for my family and create a loving, caring home for them." And my grandfather, he could not see it. It was like he was from a different dimension. He said, "Well, tell yourself whatever you need to so that you can sleep, but I guess you think you're a big shot now." And they argued for about 5 minutes. It got heated. My grandpa got back in the car. He drove back to West Virginia after only being in the house for about 10 minutes. And 3 months later, my grandpa George died alone in his house, a victim of the chemicals and the coal mines that he had breathed all of his life. But by the end of the book, I saw that he had laid the foundation to at least give my dad an opportunity to get out. He worked in those coal mines from the time he was in 5th grade till he was out of high school. But he was really smart. He was really well read. He worked at Union Carbide for 25 years to take care of his family. So he never really experienced the American dream himself, but he gave my dad and me the opportunity that we could see further and go further than he did. So I came to respect and have some sympathy and some gratitude for what he had done for our family.
Was there someone in your family that you talked to that maybe gave you that perspective that changed the way you think about him?
I think it was my dad, and my mom.
They're still around? Still?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've been really lucky in that aspect. My dad's 85, my mom's 82.
Awesome.
They're both still kicking it. I bought an Airstream. I knew that I couldn't write this book at home or in my office because I know I'd be inundated with interruptions. So I bought an Airstream. I drove it out to the Indian reservation here, and I would go there every day. Spend 8, 9, 10 hours there. And then my dad said, "Hey, since you're done writing the book, can I have your Airstream?" So I said, "Sure." So he's got the Airstream up in Michigan in the summer because he lives in Florida. So yeah, he's still around. I'm really grateful for that.
That's awesome. I mean, it's good to recognize like what's the best way that I can be creative and kind of get out the message that I want to. What was the toughest part you think about kind of isolating yourself?
I do not like being alone.
Yeah.
I don't do well alone. I like being around other people, especially my wife and my kids. So driving out there in the morning and then looking at my life experiences and going back and reliving everything. So it really was an experience that really made me raw emotionally. So being alone and being raw and then working through the content of the book, going back and reliving some of that stuff, that was the hardest part for me.
One of the stories, I know this is kind of going, sort of deep in the well, but one of the stories that you had told, I'd love to expand on a little bit, is about your time playing high school football. and,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna just read a quote here, and I'll set this up. So the reason I think it's important, because I feel like it helps sort of illustrate your character. And I have a funny kind of like similar story, where I'll just tell it to you. So I was a junior in high school. I played freshman football. Sophomore year, I didn't play because I had to babysit my younger sisters. They needed me home. So after school, I'd work out like crazy and just go straight home. And then my junior year, I'm at sort of football tryouts, and so I'm a junior. The varsity coach comes up to me and he says, "Hey, you don't know the playbook. You didn't play last year. We're going to put you on JV," which, as you know, is pretty embarrassing, right? And a junior on JV. So 99% of my peers are on the varsity team. And so the JV coach comes up to me and he says, "Hey, you're the most athletic guy on the team. Do you want to play quarterback?" Which was not a great idea, but I will tell you, it was the most fun I've ever had in my life playing sports. Like I played the whole game. I played so many different positions. I've never had that much fun in my life. And then my senior year came. I'll tell you, my junior year, when I had so much fun, varsity was 0-10. Didn't win a game. So I was having all the fun in the world. They were miserable. Senior year, a little bit of the opposite. I'm on the team. I'm not playing. I have zero catch. I'm a receiver. I have zero catches going into the last game of the season. And like garbage time, fourth quarter, I'm in there. I get a catch. To me, it feels like a Super Bowl winning touchdown, And fast forward though, I'm in English class, and my teacher tells us we've got to write these college essays. So I write about like my great grandmother passing away. I turn it in and she's like, "There's so many of these. I'm just have to, it's not a bad thing, but I think you should go back to the drawing board." And so it made me reflect on that whole experience. And I wrote my college essay based on like what I learned about not quitting. I didn't quit once. I didn't like, kind of like fake any routes. I ran everything 100%. And so I go back to this quote in your book. I kind of related to this story that you told. And you said, "I never gave up on being a leader. Years later, I was finally able to look back on that experience and appreciate how having the grit and determination to keep fighting and see the entire season through to the end proved invaluable." So I know your story is a bit different, but when you think about those couple of years in high school football, what did you learn about yourself?
Oh, that's great. I love your story. A lot of that resonates. My junior year, we were great. We were 9-1. We almost went to the state finals. I played offense and defense. The camaraderie, the teamwork, the performance, the dedication to excellence. I learned so much in playing that. But when I was in fifth grade, I made a commitment. I would be the captain of the football team when I was a senior, and I did it. I was the captain. And we were 0-10 because all the seniors had graduated. My high school class was a little bit of a druggy class. There weren't a lot of athletes in it. They were out smoking pot, and a lot of the sophomores were playing varsity football with me, and we lost. We got beat bad 10 games in a row, and that was. Every single game, I doubted my strength, I doubted my courage, I doubted my masculinity, I doubted, my leadership ability. I'm supposed to be leading this team to success. I'm the captain, and it was brutal. But it, like you said, it taught me, do not quit, see it out, and that was always one of my things. My dad, said too. Look, you don't have to play sports. You don't have to do, this, but if you're going to do it, you finish it. You start it, you finish it. And I did. And I like you, this is so funny. I wrote a college essay, and my college essay was about that losing season. I got an A on it. I don't know where it's at.
I have mine. I'll send it to you.
I thought I included it in the book.
Yeah.
And I try to instill that in my kids today, that just because you have a losing streak, it doesn't mean you're a loser, and it doesn't mean you're not a leader. And sometimes life is really tough that way, but you persevere and you have grit.
There's this bookmark I used to have, and it said, "Never, never, never quit." And it was a Winston Churchill quote. I always think
Beautiful.
of that. Yeah. I do think in life we come to these impasses, and sometimes it's a fork in the road, and we've got to make a decision, right? We either go left or we go right. And you mentioned a time where you actually visited Winston Churchill's bunker, ironically. I'm just curious, like when you think of that visit for you, what was the significance of that in terms of that sort of determination and some of the some of those skills that you in life skills that you talk about?
I'll never forget the day that my wife and I went to visit the bunker, and it's it's underneath the kind of castle there in the Parliament. You go down, and man, it's really tight. And one bomb could have just buried them all. One well-placed bomb, but the courage and the determination, the tenacity to fight for freedom and to not give up in the face of the German and the Nazis destroying all of Europe, and the determination to fight for what's right to the end, and to fight for freedom. And you had the axis of evil. You had Japan, you had Germany, you had Italy, and you had that axis of evil. Today we have Russia, we have Iran, we have China, North Korea. So you kind of have a new axis of evil, different players. Same idea, though. They want to take over power and control an authoritarian type of governments. So in writing Experiencing the American Dream, I had to get in touch with what drives the American dream. What drives the American dream is freedom. And most entrepreneurs, most innovators, job creators, they look at the world as they don't look at it through, many people misunderstand the American dream because they look at it as materialism and greed. That is not the American dream. The American dream is creating value and opportunities for other people. People like Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, people that innovators, even Disney in his day, they weren't thinking, how can I make as much money as possible? They were thinking, how can I create and express myself and create something that makes people's quality of life better? And that's really what drives entrepreneurism and job creation. And I think that the American dream needs kind of a PR campaign so that people understand what it really is, and that it's not about greed. It's not even about having a nice house, which is fine. It's about self-expression, creativity, love, and generosity with your family and the people that you love. And that's really the dream.
Yeah, it sounds like, if I'm hearing it, there's a lot of misconceptions, right? And maybe it's media, maybe it's how people were raised. And I think one of the things that, just to sort of commend what you do in the book, I think, is that you point out how important it is to be coachable, and how to not always think you know everything, and to be open and have a curious mindset. And so I do think, like, you kind of go through this shift as a reader, going through some of the examples and stories that you tell.
The stories are critical because this was really kind of three books in one. It's a self-development, personal book. It's a memoir of how the journey of, when I started my company, I had an overhead projector, I had a yellow pad like this one, and I had $30,000 in debt and I was 27 years old.
And Mark, can we take a step back for a second?
Yeah.
You're 27. You've got some great ideas. You're working for somebody else. You walk into his office. He's 30 minutes late. What happens?
Yeah. Well, it was the president of the broker dealer I worked for. And I said, look, I don't want to do this with my clients' money anymore. I don't want to speculate. I don't want to stock pick, market time, track record, invest. I want to use academic investing principles. I want to charge fees, not commissions, because commissions create conflicts of interest. And, I'm, hoping for this revelation and this, meeting of the minds. And I want to help, don't you want to stop people from gambling with their money and give them a great experience of life? And he was not having any of that. He said, look, these mutual fund companies pay us big money. They sponsor all of our conventions. They give us tons of money to promote their products. And there's no way I'm going to let you do what you want to do, which is in that. So I slid my resignation across the desk. And well, that's the other thing. I said, plus I know you're making too much in commissions. Your lifestyle could collapse. And I said, you don't know anything about me. And I slid that resignation across the desk and I said, I'm done. And he didn't, he just sat there. He didn't know what to say, but I got up and left and walked out. And that's I want people to understand the American dream from a perspective that it's a screen by which you see the world. And based on the way that you see the world, things will become obvious to you. And then other things will become, you'll start to question and look for the answers to things. If you don't have that screen that it's possible, you won't do the curiosity part. You won't ask questions. You won't be curious. The best way to experience your American dream is to help other people experience theirs. And if you'll help other people experience their American dream, yours is just going to materialize. The other thing, you talked about coachability. Coachability is tough. When I interviewed Michael Phelps, and we talked about coachability, 28 medals, more than anybody else ever in Olympic history. He practiced 7 days a week, even during the holidays, two practices a day. And we talked about coachability. Coachability is, and my dad told me when I was 10, look, find somebody that's already accomplished what you want to accomplish. And then either pay them money to coach you or getting business with it. A lot of people will just give you their time, energy, and passion because they're trying to help. But do what they say to do, and a lot of these people have written books too. Do what they say and eliminate the yeah, but I don't want to, or yeah, but you don't understand, I don't have enough money, or yeah, but you don't understand, I call these money demons, I don't have enough time, or my situations, I was born into a poor situation. The coachability is doing the thing that the coach says to do, even when you don't want to do it, or understand even why you're doing it. And I think coachability is an amazing skill to have. A lot of people don't want to be coachable because they feel like it's somehow a hit to their ego or their self-esteem. But really high performers know that being coachable is the path to performance.
Michael said he was coachable during his
Michael said he was coachable. His coach, Bob Bowman, he said they would get into yelling matches. They would just, but he told me in the interview, he said, without him, I would have never done what I did. And when I was 11 years old, he told me I was going to go to the Olympics by the time I was 15. And after he was in the Olympics when he was 15, Bob told him, you're going to set a world record in 6 months. And so he set the vision for him. He knew the strategies. He knew how hard it had to work out. He knew what the diet needed to be like. He knew what the mental side had to be like. He knew what the form needed to be like. And Michael submitted to the coaching.
Yeah. Wow.
And he told me that that's one of his keys to greatness is being coachable.
Have you ever had a chance to watch Coach K's masterclass?
No, I haven't. No.
There's this great story where he talks about like the Redeem Team documentary, which if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend. I think it's on Netflix still. So they recruit Kobe to kind of revamp the program. They really need his leadership, and really like they can't afford to lose, right? And Coach K is handpicked to lead the team, and so they're about to like go to, I'm not sure if it was China, or they're about to go somewhere, and their last practice, Kobe's just taking shots left and right. I mean, he's pulling up and taking jumpers, bad shots that he shouldn't take. So before the flight, Coach called him into his office and he says, he's like, I thought he was going to chew me out. He's like, I sat him down and I just showed him the tape, right? Like, I'm not going to tell him. I showed him the tape. I'm like, these are bad shots and we're not going to win if you're taking these shots. We have no chance. And he said, he looked at me and he's like, you're right. right? Like the best players who you think, I mean, I can't even count how many gold medals Phelps has, but like you think of Kobe Bryant, you might think he's kind of afforded to think that he knows everything, and he takes the coaching as well. So I love that.
Yeah, the one of the great quotes I love is that a great coach can help you win games. A good coach can help you win games. A great coach can change your life. And that's really the beauty, whether it's business or whether it's athletics or whether it's coaching on how to have a great marriage. Finding someone who's already unlocked it, and then really just saying, I'm going to do what you tell me to do, and keep going back for feedback. It's really, really an amazing ability to be able to have.
Do you have any thoughts or advice? Somebody's hearing this and they're thinking I could use a coach or I can use a mentor. Do you have any sort of general advice on like, hey, here's what I would do if you're doing XYZ? Maybe it's not in finance, but like here's my just general advice on finding a mentor. What would you say?
Yeah, you want to look. First, you want to do a gut check and see what you really want to accomplish in life. Or in other words, what your purpose is in life.
Mm.
Most people live in a world of scarcity, trying to chase more money, without really taking the time to define what their real purpose for money in life is. And if you'll slow down a little bit, develop a purpose for life that's greater than money, commit to that purpose, and then you can start to look around and say, okay, well, who has a similar purpose? Who has similar values? Who has similar things that they're pursuing? And then what do I love doing? My dad always said, do what you love and the money will come. And if you'll do what you love and find someone that's already achieving great results, that's the kind of person you want to approach. Whether it's a spiritual gift you're looking for or ability, or whether it's a business ability, a sports ability, relationship ability, find someone that's already created what you want to create. And when in a business aspect, this is very counter to what a lot of people believe. Don't be afraid to start at the bottom.
Tell me about
that. I always tell my kids, look, if you have to go to work for free and just go to somebody and say that owns a restaurant or owns a business, say, look, you don't know me. I don't have any experience in your business, but I'll work for free for a month, and you see how hard I work, and you work harder than anybody else, and you listen and you take direction and you learn and you study and you stay open to new opportunities. I'm an entrepreneur. We have 70 employees. When I find somebody, whether they start at the front desk or they start in engineering or whatever they start at, if they work hard, I notice. And then I keep giving them opportunities to get education and to learn and to grow. Probably 70% of our jobs that we have today didn't exist 5 years ago. So there's all kinds of opportunities if you're willing to work. And if you have to start at the bottom, start at the bottom. I think too many people think they're going to graduate from college or be influencers on Instagram or TikTok and then instantly make $1 million a year. I'm sorry to tell them, it doesn't work that way. Every once in a while, somebody gets lucky, but as a whole, it usually doesn't work out that way.
I think that's great advice. When you put in your notice and you slid it across the desk, I'm curious, where were you from like a risk tolerance perspective? Like, were you financially independent at that point in your life and you can easily afford to make those decisions, or was it tougher?
No, it was, well, I definitely wasn't financially independent because I was 27 years old. But I attended a debate between Rex Sinquefield, who studied under Eugene Fama at the University of Chicago. And the conversation was about efficient markets, using science to invest instead of predictions like in the back of a brokerage firm. And I knew I wanted to use the science. And I knew that I was using stock picking, market timing, and track record investing. And my clients were with my own money, my family's money, and my clients' money, and it wasn't working.
And you say that's like gambling, basically.
That's gambling because all the knowable and predictable information about the future is already factored into the stock prices today. Therefore, only random and unpredictable information will change the prices going forward. So it's gambling. It is flat out gambling. And people that got lucky and beat the market over a 10 or 20-year period, the correlation to winning in the future is zero. There's zero correlation about whether you did it in the past and you can repeat it into the future. So markets are extremely efficient. I knew it was gambling. And for me, it was a state change for me. The state change was, I felt sick at my stomach when I heard the debate and I heard Rex academically tear this idea of stock picking apart, because I knew I was doing it and I knew I was hurting people, and I couldn't live like that. For me, it was, look, you either do this, and if you have to live in a box under a highway, then that's what you're going to do. But you're not going to keep selling people stuff that doesn't work and hurts people. And it was just unconscionable at the time. But no, there was no safety net. There was no safety net, and there was high risk to doing it. But in my mind, there was no other alternative because I couldn't keep going on the way I was going.
Wow. I appreciate you sharing that.
You're welcome.
You know, one of the stories that comes to mind when you talk about, I think of, like, sometimes you've probably heard this, sometimes your greatest strength could also be your greatest weakness, you know, that type of a saying. And it makes me think of that story that you told. And I'll read this quote about Sir Isaac Newton. You said, "This was a man with an IQ of 190 who could predict where a planet would be in orbit 1 year in the future, but he couldn't predict where the market would be 1 day later." And I think, when you talk about, like, how your intelligence can work against you as an investor, I felt like that was a really good illustration of that.
So in the book, I talk about biases. These are things that all people have, ways of thinking that are not scientific, that are flawed, that have them make investing mistakes that harm their future. One of those is called attribution error. And that is that if I'm really smart and good about one thing, does it equate to being smart and good about another thing? So look, a physicist, 190 IQ doesn't give you the ability to read a manual over the week on how to fly a 747 and then get into no one would make that mistake, right? As a matter of fact, there's studies, but people make that mistake. There's movies that have the pilots get incapacitated and then a passenger goes and they land the plane, and that has never happened once ever. I looked it up. And pilots will tell you that it is impossible for a non-trained pilot to land a jet. But people make that mistake with investing all the time. They assume I'm really smart in this area. I'm an accountant, I'm an engineer, I'm a chemist, I'm a doctor, which is great. But that doesn't equate to 70 years of academic scientific study in economics and portfolio and markets. And people vastly underestimate what it takes to actually build engineered portfolios and then algorithms to keep them disciplined and rebalanced over 30 years. And that's when they get in trouble. And that's what happened to Isaac Newton. He got caught up in the South Sea bubble. He thought he could time it. Obviously, he was a genius, one of the smartest people that's ever lived. He lost the equivalent of $3 million of his wealth. It nearly bankrupted him. He lost it all. And he regretted it till the day that he died. And he said, I can calculate the movements of the heavenly bodies, but I can't calculate the madness of people. And people have to remember, stock prices are determined by people's behaviors. Most people can't even, predict their own behavior, much less the behavior of 7 billion people on the planet.
Yeah, I love that story that you tell with, like, diet and exercise. Like, you can have an off, night or weekend, and you can wake up Monday morning. You look at the scale, you'll almost be where you're normally at. But with investing, it's quite different. One bad day, one bad decision could impact everything.
You really read the book. That's awesome.
Do you do these where people don't read? I imagine it's sometimes.
Oh yeah, I've been in interviews. They said, "Oh yeah, your book. Tell me about it." They didn't read it, but it's really cool to talk with you about it. Yeah. So if you're on a diet and you lose 30 pounds, and you're feeling good about it, you go out, you have one piece of cheesecake. You're probably not going to have a heart attack the next day, probably. So, but that's not the way investing works. It's the enigma of a single mistake. I'll give you an example. From 1995 to 2000, U.S. large stocks made 22.5% a year for 5 years in a row. Tech stocks averaged 45% per year for 5 years in a row. And nobody wanted to use academic science to invest. All they wanted to do is throw it in large tech stocks. Very reminiscent of what's going on right now. And then what happened? Well, then large US stocks lost 50%. Tech stocks lost 75%. And if you're 50 or 60 years old and you end up dumping all your money into these large companies, and then you lose 50 to 75% of your money, 3 years before retirement, it can be game over. And you can destroy a whole life worth of investing. But it's not just that. It's, when I was 27, I thought when the academic science got out in the world, that it would be a renaissance, an enlightenment, that it would get better. It's gotten worse. Look at all the people gambling and speculating with Bitcoin that have, lost billions. Look at Madoff, con man. You got commodities in the 1990s. Everybody wanted to dump all their money in commodities. Over the last 15 years, commodities have earned zero, not even 1% over 15 years. So you have all these insane things people are doing with their money. And they have this bias of FOMO, fear of missing out. They see their friends doing it. They see people seemingly getting rich overnight, and they get sucked into doing it, and then taking more risk than they ever knew they had. And that's the kind of the enigma of a single mistake. In investing, it can be deadly to your portfolio.
What are the age ranges for your kids?
All the way up to 31, down to 9.
Wow, busy out. So let's say you're 31-year-old, maybe had a couple jobs, maybe has a savings account, 401k at this point. What are just like a few pieces of general financial advice that you impart on your 31-year-old?
Yeah. Start early. Start early. My dad said if you'll save 10% of your money and prudently, wisely invest it in equities, over a lifetime, you'll likely have more money than you actually earned in your lifetime. So start early. I know there are gurus that say pay off your debt first. I don't believe that. I believe people get comfortable with debt. I believe pay yourself first. You might have those credit cards or those school loans or whatever. They'll get paid off, but you're losing time. The more you wait to invest, the more time you lose, and that time is extremely valuable with compound interest. When you're young, dollar cost average. Set an amount, $500 a month, $300 a month, $800 a month, whatever it's going to be, whatever you can afford. Put it in there every single month. You'll never miss it. If you are lucky enough to have a 401k, use the 401k first. Many people have the company match, so you could double that just with the company match. And then take the other 3 or 4% and then put that into your own accounts. And stay disciplined and don't get sucked into gambling. Stay off of Robinhood. People have you got your cell phone, right? And they got their Robinhood right next to their DraftKings. I read an article the other day that said that more people are now gambling on sports than they are investing in portfolios. It's a sad commentary. People are confusing, and it makes it harder. It makes it, when they gamify investing, like Robinhood does and other apps, they hook into this human instinct, this addiction to gamble with your money, and it's extremely destructive.
I love that. I just want to underscore this real quick, because you talk about like finding your purpose. I often get the question, like, I don't know what I want to do. And I'm sure you hear that from young people as well.
Yeah.
Do you have like just a couple sort of cliff notes on like, what can I begin to do? It's in the book, so I think people should read it, but like, what are some of the cliff notes of like, okay, for you to begin to discover your purpose, here are a few prompts, here are a few questions you should ask yourself. Cause I know you're big on, the right questions to ask and kind of simmer on.
Yeah. Yeah. So you want to think about other people. You want to think about what you want to create for other people, not yourself. This is where the purpose starts to grow. And I have people just brainstorm. And the question is, if I lived my life with this purpose, then would I feel moved, touched, and inspired by my own life? If I lived my life with this purpose, would I feel moved, touched, and inspired by my own life? And your purpose isn't out there like something you find. Find your purpose. You don't find it. It's not something you're born with. There's no purpose gland. There's no organ, the purpose organ. What it is you create your purpose. And you create your purpose by asking yourself, what do I want to create for the world that will leave me moved, touched, and inspired by my own life? You know, people create things like generosity and love. They create things like creativity, things like faith, things like, I mean, there's millions of different purposes you could come up with. So I have people do a brainstorm in my class. I have people do a brainstorming exercise of the things that are important to them in life, values that they have. You can start looking at your values, what's important to you, what you want to create for the world, and what you'd like to give to other people. And then you drill it down. You drill it down to 3, and then you look at the 3, and then you drill it down to 1. And it's not something that you're stuck with. You can create your purpose, and as you grow and explore and expand, you can always modify or change your purpose. For me, it's helping people discover and create their American dream, and that's what drives me, and that's what created the book and our time together. It's not an easy thing to do, and as you pointed out really, really well, most people today want hints and tips. They want the fast, the easy. Give me the hints, give me the tips. When I was working with my agent for the book, he said, well, what are the hints and tips you're going to give people? I said, I'm not. I said, the secret to investing is there's no secret. And the secret to life is there's no secret. There's questions. If you'll dwell in the question, and that's what many of the great people did. Einstein said, look, I would dwell in one question for decades. And then I would have the innovation almost from my subconscious that would well up and give me the answer. And many economists, many philosophers, many scientists, they've dwelt on, they would dwell on questions for decades. People want the quick and easy answer. The quick and easy answer is seldom the right one.
Yeah, I think that's a theme in your book. You say like there's the easy way and then there's the other way. And there's no shortcuts. So I love that. Okay, quick pivot to fatherhood. Fast forward 20 years from now, you've got 8 kids. Pretty wide range, right? What do you hope that your kids would say about you as a dad?
Oh, wow. Number one, I want them to be able to say that I was there for them, that they were seen, they were supported, they were loved, and that dad was always there for us. I want them to be able to say that dad instilled in us the love of God, and that he helped us to have a purpose in our life, and that he helped us pursue the American dream for our family, and we always felt loved by our dad. And if they can say that, then I'll consider, that I was a pretty good parent.
What do you do to show up as your best version of yourself at work and at home? When you think about self-care routines, things like that, is there something that you try to do on a regular basis?
I had an experience. I had asthma my whole life when I was growing up, and I went probably 13 years ago now. I went to a Denver Jewish hospital. Oh my, there you go.
Always got to be within arm's reach. I hear you.
Oh my gosh, yes, my whole life.
Yeah.
And I went to the Denver Jewish Hospital, the best pulmonary hospital in probably the world, because I couldn't get it under control, and I kept going to the emergency room, and they did a CAT scan on my chest, and when they did that, they found that my ascending aorta, the artery that goes up and then turns down and then feeds your whole body, was too big. I had an aneurysm.
Was this because of prednisone or no? This was
no, not because of the prednisone.
Okay.
Although I have a story about that too. I lost my hips to that. I have artificial hips because of the prednisone, but I'm kind of the bionic man. So they said, look, it's 33. Maybe you're just born this way. Maybe it won't grow. It's supposed to be 33. It's 44. So every year I'd get a CAT scan, and it was slowly but surely growing. And finally, a year and a half ago, 2 years now, they said, you're 52, dude. You're going to have open heart surgery. We're going to have to crack you open and cut out that part of your aorta like 1.5 inches and replace it with a hose. I'm like, what? You're going to replace it with a hose? Are you nuts? They're like, no. And if you don't, it's going to explode and you're going to bleed out in your own chest in about 3 minutes. So 2 weeks later, I'm in the hospital having this surgery. And it really made me think about my whole life. Because the next 5 months, it was not a fast recovery. It was slow, it was painful. Thank God for my wife and my family that supported me through it. My wife was amazing. But at the end of it, I'm like, look, you're 60 years old. If you get another 20, maybe another 30, if you get that much, what do you really want to use the rest of your life for? What is going to be important enough for you to spend this next 20 years continuing to work and grow? And for me, that was writing the book. I wanted to write a book to share about how you could prudently invest and experience your American dream. I want to do a documentary that I'm working with David Eagleman, who also gave me a great quote about the book. He's a neuroscientist from Stanford. We're going to do a documentary on brain science and how to use your brain to better invest. And then I want to build a dream center, an experiential thing that families would come to and experience creativity and creating purpose for their family and experiencing their dreams. And I want to pass that legacy on to my employees, to our clients, to our advisors. And so that's what my American dream is right now, is focusing on those three things.
It sounds like that experience really gave you clarity, if anything.
It really did. I mean, you talked about the regiment, and it made me really value my health. I mean, people know, oh, my health is everything. You hear that all the time. But when you've had your health, really, you come close to, actually, I was dead for 16 minutes on the table. Now, they didn't tell me they did it on purpose because I should have thought about that. Of course, the heart can't be pumping when you take that out. So they stopped my heart, they stopped my breathing, they cut out that piece. I was dead for 16 minutes. People are like, what'd you see? I didn't see anything. It would have been great to write a book called 16 Minutes in Heaven. I'm sure that would have been a bestseller. But it made me think how important health is.
Yeah.
So I try to work. I get up this morning. I got up. I went and lifted weights. I try to do aerobics. I lift. I spend time with my family. I try to stay fit. I try to eat well, although I'm not perfect with that. Get enough sleep. The basics. But I heard a saying the other day. I'd rather be the oldest person at the gym than the youngest person in the old folks' home. So.
I like that.
So there's a lot of young people at the gym.
Yeah.
I'm trying to hang with them.
A couple of questions before I let you go. Do you have a piece or two of just, sort of keys to a happy marriage? What would you tell somebody that's kind of starting out?
Yeah. Well, for me and for Melissa, it's to put God in the middle of the marriage. To come from a perspective of, loving and serving each other, telling the truth to each other. Since both of us have been through marriages before, we did a lot of counseling, a lot of therapy, a lot of things to make sure our relationship is strong, open communication, telling the truth, making each other, I think it's key to make each other a priority. Because things get busy. You get the business and the kids, and you forget about date night, and you forget about taking a trip together, and you just kind of drift apart. And then you have two people doing their own thing, and they're not really focused on each other. And as a husband, this is an extra bonus one, not in the book. I really try to admit when I'm wrong. Now, when my wife tells me something that she's not happy about in my behavior or our relationship, as a man, my first instinct is to be very defensive. Well, that's not true, and I do this and I do that, and you don't appreciate what I'm really doing, but I need to calm myself down and not take it personal, and then figure out what's my part in this, and then acknowledge what my part in it is, and be able to say I'm sorry and be genuine about it. Being right and being married don't tend to go very well together.
Yeah, I've heard that. Do you want to be right or do you want to be in love?
Yeah. So I try to be humble, and I'm not perfect at it. I mean, I'm not, but I try to be, and marry a really generous, kind, loving woman.
Yeah.
That helps a lot too.
Okay, last couple of questions here. Is there a book or two? I mean, I know you mentioned the Napoleon Hill book, but are there a couple books recently? Don't have to be business books that have impacted you that you recommend other people read?
Of course, as you mentioned, Napoleon Hill. That's the foundation. I think that's the number one selling personal development book of all time. I like to mix it up. I like to mix my reading up. I like to read biographies.
What's a good one?
I love the Steve Jobs biography. I love to read biographies about our founding fathers. I love to read stuff about Washington and Hamilton, and I've read the Hamilton book that the play was made off of. Love that play, musical. I try to read books that challenge me, that make me think. I love to read books on physics. I love to read books on science. I love to read books on the brain, and I love fiction. I had trouble in school. I was in second grade and I was in the lowest reading group, and my teacher was like, told my dad and mom, like, dude, it's not, he's in the lowest group. He's really struggling here. So my dad, in his very non-PC way, did he hire a tutor? No. He said, all right, boy. He still calls me boy. I'm 62. And he said, okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to read an hour every day over the summer, and you're not coming out of your room until you read for an hour when you wake up in the morning. And for the first week, I probably cried, and but after that, I started reading. And by the end of that summer, I was in the number one reading group, and I loved reading. It's been a passion of mine my whole life. I always try to coach my kids to read. My favorites is I love Stephen King. I love his books. His books a lot about childhood, whether it's it or some of his other books about, and it's always about good over evil. In almost all of his books, the good always wins out over evil, which I love. And then I love Hemingway. Hemingway is my favorite author of all. So I love to mix it up, and I think you can learn a lot from. And all of my books are marked up. I have notes, I have quotations, I have questions, if you see a book marked up in the house, they know I read it.
That's awesome. I recently picked up a Hemingway. It's like a couple of short stories put together, like found it at Costco. And I just read a couple stories so far, but yeah, it's fascinating to read because you get caught up in the business books. They're all great, but when you read from someone from a different sort of environment and time of life, it's interesting to see how they think and how they write.
I love the Old Man and the Sea. I got my kids to read when they're 10 years old. Of course, just an absolute classic, and then A Movable Feast. And from a story perspective, A Short Happy Life of Francis McComb, that's an incredible book, incredible short story. But I really loved Hemingway. It's a shame that he died the way he did with suicide.
Yeah. Last question for you. If you're talking to someone maybe early on in their career, they want to make a mark on this world, just a couple of general life or career advice lessons, what would you impart on them?
Don't have a mentality of entitlement. It's so destructive. I'm entitled to this position. I'm entitled to this respect. I'm entitled to this money. I'm entitled to this house. I'm entitled to this. The entitlement mentality is so destructive. And the victimization mentality, the screen that I'm entitled to things that I didn't earn, and the screen that I'm a victim and I can't get better. Work on killing those screens off, because there's examples of people, no matter what circumstances, and people are born into, look, we were born into it in West Virginia, terrible, destitute poverty. But it is possible, if you work on yourself and you study and you grow and you learn, that you can get out of almost any circumstance that you're born into. And focus on creating value for other people. It's not about you. It's about creating value for others. And if you focus on that, not only will you make money, but you'll have a happier life.
I love it. Mark, do you feel like we missed anything or left anything out? Anything we should add?
Boy, I don't think so. Man, you did a great job. You did an incredible job reading that book.
Thank you.
I really am grateful for this interview. I really appreciate that. And I think we covered it a lot.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I try to think of, it's important for the listener, viewer, reader, but it's also important for you to have fun in kind of telling your story and sort of the arc of the conversation. So, yeah, I'm glad. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And I appreciate you just leaning into these questions. I know some of them are not easy. So thank you for that. I always say it's my job not to screw it up from here. So
well, you did a great job. The questions were brilliant. I love your story about football.
I'm going to send you I have it.